Alrighty, welcome in everyone. Before we begin today's talk, it's important to acknowledge the land upon which Cal State University is built. We recognize that California State University, San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of the California State University, San Bernardino community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold California State University San Bernardino more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to our co-host, Mary, for our good news of the week.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Texera. I teach in the Department of Sociology, and this is Zora Lynn's program. She is, we have to give her big ups for doing all of this and talking Sheriff Graziano into joining us today. The one piece of good news that I have this week, because in the criminal justice system, we've been more negative, newspapers are more negative, society is more negative, but we get a little nugget every now and then. And just in the last week, the Supreme Court, by a decision of 9-0, and that never happens in the Supreme Court. They looked at a case of a man whose wife called and said that, you guys need to go over there. I think they were separated or something. You guys need to go over there. I think he's suicidal. And when they got there, he was sitting on the porch and he said, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. And they said, well, we're going to take you to 72 hours observation anyway. So as they're taking him away, he says, I don't want you guys to go in my house and take my guns. I've got 2 guns in the house. I don't want you to take them. And they took them anyway. And the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court shot down the police right to take guns. I think they call it, let's see, they call it the rubric under which you can send cops out is called community caretaking, it's called. So you're doing a health check on someone, but that cannot be a pretext to go into someone's house and take everything. So the evidence that is found in these so-called community caretaking actions has been shot down by the Supreme Court. So they are not admissible in court. So that's my piece of good news. So thank you, Zora Lynn, and I'll hand it over to you again.
Yes, thank you for the good news. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest today. Sheriff Kristin Graziano is South Carolina's first female sheriff in the state's history. In her 20 years in law enforcement, she has recognized that the sheriff's office role in racial profiling has destroyed the relationship between the community and the police. In becoming Sheriff of Charleston County, Graziano has moved to end her department's relationship with immigration enforcement, dismantle racist policing, and restore trust within her community in her first days in office. Graziano has dedicated her career to making the sheriff's office more accountable and more responsive to the community. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you, Sheriff, if you'd like to introduce your guests, and we can go away with our conversation for the day.
Thank you, Zora Lynn. Again, I am Kristin Graziano. Like Zora Lynn said, I do have 32 years experience in law enforcement. I think we got a couple, we're only off by 12 years. Yeah, I have dedicated my life to community service and to my community in law enforcement. I do know that we have a lot of change that needs to happen. I agree that I'm one of those change makers, and I am happy to be the person that is going to introduce you to my staff that is with us today, that I believe is a part of that change. And I will defer to my chief deputy, Joyce Smith, and let her introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joyce Smith. I'm the chief deputy here at Charleston County Sheriff's Office. I recently came in with our new sheriff, leaving a 25-year career at North Charleston Police Department, which is one of our brother agencies still in Charleston County. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be a part of the team that's going to be working with the vision of Sheriff Graziano, and hopefully be able to execute plenty of change in this county as we do so. So I'm just absolutely happy to be invited here as a guest today.
And I think you get to introduce Shaundra.
And also on the web today, we have Chandra Scott, who is our general counsel. So I'll let her say a few words about herself.
Good evening, afternoon, don't know which one it is for everybody, but I'm Shaundra, and I am coming as the first general counsel with Sheriff's Office, and so I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to kind of put all of my skills together in order to help Sheriff Graziano achieve her goals and her mission and her vision for the Sheriff's Office, and how that plays into making sure that we are doing everything that we need to do for the community. So I'm really excited to be here and to have conversations with you this evening.
And we have one more on staff. Our newest major, Fletcher King, should be on. If you want to take a minute and introduce yourself, Major.
I don't think the major is there. I don't see.
I don't see him.
Mm-mm.
Okay. He
So-
was. We might have lost him. He's kind of out a little distance working today. So
Well, you're not calling him shy or anything. He's not shy, is he?
no, he's definitely not shy.
Okay,
No, he
then-
would be coming under probably Joyce Smith's link if he
Okay.
tries to join back.
Okay. So maybe we can get started with you, Sheriff Graziano.
Okay, let's get started.
If you just
Zorlin,
like to go ahead and kind of give yourself like a bit of a introduction on what you've done in the community, how you've moved to recognize like the disparities within your community, and how you've taking on this position have moved to push for a greater change within your community.
Yeah, so Zorlin, when you first contacted me, it had to do with making history, removing barriers, and recognizing disparities in the community. And the first day I walked into this office, I rescinded the 287G agreement that our agency had with ICE. That agreement was basically racial profiling at the highest level in our agency. It allowed people coming into our detention facility that were from the Brown community to be held beyond their charges because of their status as their status in the country. So they were not documented. And so these people could be brought into our facility with a minor charge, could be a driving charge, and they would pay their rent money and their money for their food for their kids, to take care of their family, to pay that bond to get out. And as they're getting ready to leave, they're told you can't go anywhere because there's a hold on you for ICE, as a detainer put on them because they were not documented, or there was no proof of their document, them being documented. I don't know about you, but I don't know too many people that carry their birth certificates around with them, even if they're American citizens. So I had a real problem with that. The biggest problem I had with that is that this was my community, and this was a community that I was very close to, that I not only campaigned in, but I was a part of. And to see people treated in that way was really difficult for me. So I made a commitment to them that we would not be complicit any longer, and that we would rescind that agreement. Day one, that's what we did.
And how do you find that relationship that your department had prior to you entering into this position, how do you find that did for your community, like in in terms of trust with your community? I assume that people that felt if I needed something, if I needed an officer to come to my home for any situation, they may feel reluctant because they may be afraid that they may be taken away while they were seeking help. So how do you find that worked in terms of trust and community policing?
Zorlin, that's a work in progress. You know, that did remove some barriers, not all barriers. We have a ways to go. But what it told them as I'm listening, and what it told our staff is that we will treat people equally, regardless of their status. And what it told our officers is that you will pay attention and treat people with dignity and respect. I don't know that from the law side perspective that was being done, but I do know that this was a practice that was being done at the detention side, and they were trained to do this. And yeah, I want to say, oh, everything's great. That's not the case. It's a work in progress. This is years of abuse and trust that it's going to take time to build back up. But I feel like we have a pretty good foothold in that community, and that community is 4% of Charleston County, which is enormous. So they are a huge part of what we do going forward. We try to be inclusive. That's one of our core values, is to be inclusive and accepting of all people. So that is just one of the things that we're doing. It is one of many. And you know, when I first took office, they said, oh, you know, I heard a lot of my colleagues say it'll be like drinking from a fire hose. And my response is, when I was in college, I was really good at that. So bring it.
Sheriff Graziano, I know you beat a long-term sheriff out of office. What was missing in the community?
You know, that's a great question, and I think what was missing in the community, from being on boots on the ground through the campaign, and really all of my career, was that contact with the community. That you know, there's a point where you become so political in a position that you're out of touch, and I felt I had a good grasp on a lot of the issues. Our community is huge. It's 990 square miles, but it stretches north to south. And from and I'll tell you guys, because I think you can understand, the Hilton Head area to the Myrtle Beach area along the map, along the coast. So, and within that, and Shaundra could even speak more to this, because she's a born and raised South Carolina. She's from here. The rich culture that exists. And if you don't understand who you're dealing with and who you're trying to, you know, serve, it's very difficult to serve those people fairly and equally. And I think I made a very concerted effort. My campaign started in COVID. My campaign ended in COVID, and we were very careful, my staff and I, to make sure that we reached everybody in the community to identify what those needs were. And my Chief Deputy Smith can probably attest to that, because she's our community relations specialist. But when it comes to community, being in touch with the community, it's not just one community, it's a multitude of communities, and we just have to make the effort to be a part. What I do want to say is this, and I know there's a lot of people that are not fans of law enforcement that often attend these Zoom calls, and Zorlin, you and I were speaking about it earlier, but we are the community too. And I think it's important for y'all to understand that we want the same things. We may not always be in agreement on how we get there, but it's important to listen.
Deputy Smith, could you get on that question also?
I think part of what was missing under the old administration here in Charleston County was the community. I think that there was just a lack of connection with the community. and they probably didn't feel like they had a voice. And that was one of the things that Sheriff Graziano ran on in her campaign, is that, you know, you will have a voice under this administration. We are part of the community. We want to be connected to the people. We want to represent the people. We want to serve the people. And I think that was really, really important. When she came in, it's kind of hard at times to kind of explain why this racial disparities exist. And we know there's a lot of factors that kind of play into that. But she understood, and we talked about and discussed coming in the transition team, how and why it was important that we get everybody on board here at the agency. And that would be the new leadership that was coming in, along with the leadership that was already present. And I think that's key to making sure that we reduce these disparities and that we get everybody on the same page. So we had to have a lot of conversations in-house and listen to all of our stakeholders, listen to our townships, the mayors and administrators in those areas, and just kind of make sure that we cultivate a process that included what everybody wanted, which, you know, when you got a lot of people involved, that's very hard to do. But it was important that we had a metric to be able to start with. So two of the things that we started with initially, Sheriff wanted to make sure that we had some diversity forums. So we listened to our in-house employees, and we had different diversity forums with people with different backgrounds. And we listened to everybody that wanted to be heard that attended those forums to try to figure out what was needed here within the agency. And again, we listened to all of the administrators from across the county that we represent to see what they needed. And then we kind of fill that in, plug that into what our mission would look like with our leadership. And I think that kind of helps when it comes to reducing racial disparity. It takes a lot of exposure. It takes a lot of exposure to different cultures, to different languages, and to just understanding each other and learning how to work together. And I think when you got that good foundation, that kind of kick starts the change. And Sheriff was very open. I wish I could say that some of these conversations were not intense, but it was very important that we had them, and it helped us to have a better understanding as to what was needed. And I think from listening to our current employees as to what was occurring in the past, they didn't necessarily feel like they were heard. So I think it was really important for them to have a voice and to be part of the team and to be part of the vision we wanted to have to create definitely a more diverse and inclusive agency here at Charleston County Sheriff's Office. And I see my partner, one of our majors, has jumped on. He's actually under my name, but that's Major Fletcher King, with the beautiful palm trees in the background behind him. So just take a minute and welcome him. And thank you for that question, sir.
Yes, thank you for answering that question. And Mr. Fletcher King, if that's how I could address you, what would you mind introducing yourself for our guests today?
Hello, my name is Fletcher King. I'm a major here at the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. I am currently, excuse the noise in the background, but I'm working something. I had to pop out to try and get on this with you guys and the sheriff.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
To follow up with that question, I know.
I'm sorry, Stan, may I?
Go ahead.
I'm always interested in why women go into a traditionally male profession. So if the three women are guests, if they don't mind telling their origin stories, I mean, you don't obviously have to go into the day you were born or anything, but when did you first start getting an interest in law enforcement? Anybody can go first.
Go ahead, Joyce.
So I'm originally from the Southeast. I'm born and raised in Arkansas, Little Rock, South Carolina area. I grew up living in some public housing. I often saw law enforcement zooming in, not the pun in there, zooming in and zooming out, but never really actually taking the time to talk to the public or reach out to the community. They came in and they did their work, or what you would call work. And I always was curious as to what they did and how they did and then why they never really interacted with the people that were not getting in trouble in the community where I live. So as I got older, I like to write, and I often wrote about law enforcement in my journal. And as I got in high school, I decided to take some business law classes and some other classes that were offered. And I just kind of fell in love with the background of law. And also I saw that as an opportunity for me to be able to do the bridging that we're doing, very similar to what we're doing tonight. So of course I graduated high school and immediately went to college, and my major was in criminal justice. And I've loved it ever since. Obviously I'm going into year 26. So that's kind of what attracted me to the field.
I'm gonna have to defer to Shaundra because this is gonna be an interesting answer. I gotta honestly say I haven't heard this one yet.
So mine is completely unconventional because there was at no point in time that I wanted to go into law enforcement. So I always wanted to be a lawyer. And my whole thing was I wanted to do any type of work that is towards the community, that helps the community, that is designed to, help anyone that does not feel that they have a voice, to be able to speak up and then create change. And so I started off working South Carolina Legal Services. I'm from Charleston, of course, and went to college and law school. And so I started off working at South Carolina Legal Services, where I worked in migrant farm worker, seasonal farm worker work. And I did that for a number of years. And then I became the executive director of the ACLU of South Carolina. And worked there. And it was at ACLU that I kind of started having a love or being introduced to legislation and politics. And so, and that was as a result of having to watch legislation to see if there were any bills that were going to be introduced that were adverse to civil rights, or that was a bill that I could support as executive director. And so from there, I started learning, where sessions were and who was the representatives in my area or throughout the state, and the senators and things of that nature. And, as you probably know, with many nonprofits, you cannot be partisan. And so there were many times where, as executive director of ACLU, I could not advocate or get behind something because it was probably Democrat, and that's what I wanted to do, or say something against something else, maybe because it was Democrat, because we just did not do that. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I saw an opportunity to help a Black woman become president of the United States. And so I worked on senior staff for Senator Kamala Harris in South Carolina. And then she ended her term, and then I did voter protection. And I think everybody knows the voter protection in 2020 was insanity. And that it was during that time that I met Sheriff Kristin Graziano, because she was running and we wanted to make sure that she won, especially being from Charleston and seeing Al Cannon be sheriff for 32 years, over half my life, in the same position. And I had never met him or never known him, never seen him in my community, nothing, no community events. And so I worked really hard with her and many other campaigns to make sure that they had voter protection, to make sure that we were advancing all of the things that we could do as far as expanding absentee, and she won. And then she called me one day and said that she wanted to make sure that she did things differently, and that she wanted legal counsel for the first time in Charleston County on staff, and if I would be interested, and I said yes. So that's my meandering path to being in law enforcement.
It's a great story, and I love your background. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so and I'll follow up, and I'll try to be brief. I think it's my story is very different from everyone else's. I was a very young person on my own at the age of 16. When I was just before I turned 16, an event happened in my family where my sister was kidnapped and went missing, and we were very close. And my family kept that from me. And days went by, week went by, and I was able to make it home because I wasn't at home at the time that happened. I was with family in another area, and I was able to, these police officers in the city of Charlottesville, Virginia, found my sister and brought her home safely, although not unharmed. And so I remember having that conversation with my sister at a very young age, and she told me that she was being held against her will at knife point in a car with an individual that kidnapped her. And she told me that she saw that police car pull up, those two police cars pull up, and she knew if she could get away, she'd be safe. And that's kind of what guided me to law enforcement. I was very proud years later, because I was very young, but years later to call those same individuals my partners.
And, my family grew up in North Carolina, and Southern state, and I've been all over the world because my dad's a military, was in the military. And one of the things when we do the family reunions in the South is I got together with my family and I found out that all the males had done jail time. And it took away their ability to vote. And so the same question, Major Fletcher, is that your title, Major? So same question goes to you. How did you get into law enforcement?
You're
still
on mute.
muted. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. So like you, my dad was military and I grew up mostly overseas, and we lived on the economy, and whatever country we were in, we lived out in that economy with the people. So when I came back to the United States, I went to South Carolina State University. I was here alone, my parents were overseas. So during the course of those years there, I had 2 bad experiences with law enforcement. After that, I decided my major was in electrical engineering technologies, but I wanted to go into the military. So at that time, President not Reagan, but Bush was cutting back. So I decided to get out of the Air Force ROTC program, continue with my engineering degree, ran out of money, got a job, had some family issues where I lost some family members. So, but I remembered what happened to me, and then it happened to my brother. So at that time, I made a choice to either stand and point and say, hey, that's a problem, or get in and try to solve the problem from the inside, be part of it. So that's what I did. I got hired with North Charleston Police Department. Then I decided to come over to the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. That's when I met Sheriff Graziano. She and I served on the SWAT team. But I wanted to be an example to the males in my family and the ones that I come in contact with, because I knew that there were some disparities out there, because I had experienced it. I wasn't going around preaching hate or anything like that. It was just understanding the game. So that's what kind of drove me into becoming law enforcement. And I gravitate towards the service aspect of it, like helping people, and we all do. But there are, I'm sorry, can't talk to him right now. Serving the public, and I'm serving my people. Now, most of my slings and arrows have come from my community, because in their eyes, how can you be a cop? Why are you doing what you're doing? So if they can get past that socioeconomic and that social screen that they have as what has law enforcement done to the depressed communities over the years, that's all true, not taken away from that. But also, if we remove law enforcement, now what do we have? So long story short, I wanted to be part of the solution, and it's going to take a while to get there, but I wanted to be part of that journey to get us there one day. So, but at least I know when I go home, I can look at myself in the mirror, I can look at my nephews, my nieces, my family and friends I know, and my character will stand for what they see. And then they'll say, yeah, well, not all police officers. And that's not the case. We got a few bad apples out there, but by and large, it's not everything. There's change that needs to happen, but it's not a magic bullet. It's not one thing you can pick and say, we fix this, everything will change. So a good, wise friend of mine told me, be the change you want to see. So that's what I try to do. but the bad experience is what drove me into being in law enforcement, plus the historical aspects, like I like reading and everything. So all of that, the 60s, the 70s, the Jim Crow laws, where it came from, redlining, all of those things. And it's surprising that the young kids, they don't understand all of that. They just want to point and say, you're the bad guy. You're the reason I didn't do or I didn't get. Until you understand the whole picture, then you can do something about it. I didn't mean to get preachy right there, but.
That's okay. I appreciate that. And thank you all for your backgrounds and your stories. And Sheriff, I know, and you sound like you got yourself surrounded by some people that believe in the same thing you believe in. And I gotta ask this question. I spent 34 years in the fire department. And I know the changes you wanna make are gonna be hard to make. So my question is how are you battling the politics and the unions in order to make those kind of changes?
And are you watching the media right now? Are you watching what's going on in Charleston right now?
I am.
My answer, the simple answer and the honest to God truth is one day at a time. I walked into this position and 3 hours later, a Black man died in our detention facility. And there's a lot of information about what people thought I should have done or what could have happened and who should be held responsible. In the end, we know that we can do better. We know we can do better in everything we do. This is not something, the detention facility is a little foreign to me because it's not what I've done as law enforcement. I'm not a detention specialist, but I inherited a mess. And I inherited, my team inherited what we knew was going to be a difficult time. But I will stand with you today and stand here today to tell you, I will not be shaken by the politics of this. I have nothing to gain politically. I have no aspirations to move anywhere beyond what we're doing as an agency and to protect the people that work for this agency as well as the community and the residents of my facilities and the staff that works in those facilities. A lot of people call them inmates. I refer to them as residents. I think there's a distinct difference. So I think they have rights and I think that we have an obligation when they're in our care. The political battle is another beast. We are fighting it at the highest levels of our government. And there are a lot of people, Stan, that want us to fail. A lot of people that want us to fail. And that's not an option. So I will continue to fight the good fight. I will continue to be honest, and I will continue to dismantle that system that's in place. But it won't be without challenges, and I recognize that. And I think the staff recognizes that. That's why they're on board. Like I said earlier, they're much smarter than I am. I am just here to help guide the ship, and that is my mission.
And the union, how are you dealing with them? Was that going smoothly, roughly? You got a lot of personnel, and I know they probably have a strong union. So is that a drawback, a battle? How are you doing there?
So the interesting thing about South Carolina is it's a right to work state, so there is no union. So no, it's not the union that I'm worried about. If it was, I could deal with that. It's the political entities involved all the way to the highest levels, to include the governor's office. There's a lot of interference. Obviously, when change needs to happen, there are a lot of people that are going to stand in your way and say, well, we've never done that before. And I think you're not looking at all the options of why change is not probably a good idea. But I'm not listening to that. And they're going to make my life as miserable as possible, but that's okay. I sleep at night. I sleep well at night. My staff is probably a little more stressed than they need to be. we're gonna stay the course. We're gonna stay the course. That's what we were put here for. Yeah, I'm here to do the right thing and not the popular thing or the political thing.
One of our panelists asked in the community in our chat, do you have, let me find it. It sounds like being a stakeholder in the community is an important part of the culture of your office, which is very heartening. Do you have any suggestions on addressing when officers are not stakeholders, zooming in and out, as Officer Smith noted? Any experiences or suggestions on how this can be addressed in a productive and tangible way?
So you're talking about officers that don't buy in, but I guess that's for Joyce, right?
Yeah, so she had
Yeah.
talked about in her intro earlier, discussing how when she was young, she recognized in her community that the police officers would come and go quickly and that they weren't really engaged in their community. So do you have any suggestions on when officers are not stakeholders, and any experiences or suggestions on how this can be addressed in a productive and tangible way?
Yeah, so I think I think in law enforcement, it's one of the areas where you actually do the opposite of when in Rome, do what Romans do. I think once you get there, you really have to truly understand the culture. And coming into these positions, we really had to take a good look at the culture that we had here at the agency. So we knew that we needed to get a lot of buy-in. And like most agencies across the country, we're extremely young. Most of our deputies on the road probably have anywhere from 3 to 5 years of experience, which is really young. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to leave deputies in the same communities all the time. If we can prevent from switching them or moving them to other areas, we want them to be able to establish relationships with the stakeholders in those communities. And the more that they see the same person, the better it is for them to, it may be easier for them to get to know those deputies and the deputies to get to know the community. One of the things that Sheriff Graziano brought into the building was service beyond the call. So we're pretty A personality and competitive in law enforcement. So now you see officers being recognized inside the agency and outside the agency for doing amazing things. And I say, sometimes they may be very small things and sometimes they may be huge things. We had an incident where we had an elderly gentleman whose residence kept getting burglarized. And of course they were damaging the residents when they were going inside, and they ended up replacing the television and working with some local businesses to make repairs to his house while they were working, because, you know, that was such a burden on him, replacing those items that were stolen. So now we see the officers like having fun doing those types of things and looking for opportunities to help the community daily while they're out there. We create community calendars within the agency, and we share those calendars and we put out announcements constantly about things that we are doing every week. Like most Tuesdays, you'll see that come out. And we make sure that we invite deputies that already work in those communities to join us. And you will definitely see it, the message coming from the top down. So you'll see one of us, if not all of us, out there engaging in whatever activities we have going on. And we created some fun things to do. We created a softball team. Now, we're not good right now, but we're working on it. And we've been playing, you know, people in the community, church leagues and stuff like that. And any way we can find opportunities to kind of engage in our communities, we do that. So we want our deputies to see that we're not only, you know, pushing out these directives, but we believe in this mission and these directives. Coming in, we had very old core values and a very old mission statement. It really looked like something that was probably written in the 70s or early 80s. So we put together some focus groups and got them to buy in and help to create our new value statement and our new mission statements. So the employees actually feel like they have a voice in some of the changes that we're making, and we're just not coming in and making changes just based on what we think. We get the buy-in from there. We really understood that education and advocacy is really important. So coming in immediately, one of the things that we wanted to do also to help our command staff understand the direction that we wanted to go, we scheduled and attended, or half of us have attended some culture training. And that's to help them to understand how we can better communicate with one another, how we did some, I want to say some skill building activities together. And we were able to share in what our new core values look like and how we can plug in every day to each and every one of those core values. And that's training that we've done from the top administration, and our middle management will be going to that training on the 25th of this month. And that's including our civilian supervisors as well. So every activity that we do or every policy that we change, we try to make sure that those activities or those policies fit into like two major themes. It's either going to help us to reduce crime or help us to build on bridging our relationships and trust in the community. So that's how we try to work and get the buy-in, and definitely making sure that we at least offer for all of our employees to have a voice in the vision and the mission we want to move towards in the future.
I think that's really wonderful. Yeah, I think that's really wonderful because it's not often you hear people that are really engaged like your office is. I think it's really interesting and awesome that you guys are doing things like you said, like diversity training, I think is what you called it, because I believe that's where a lot of policing goes wrong, is that we don't, some officers may not know how to engage in certain communities and with certain people of different backgrounds. So I believe that diversity training in any aspect, specifically law enforcement, would be really good for policing and should be something that I believe other offices should take part in terms of getting that relationship built and building those bridges back with the community.
One of the questions that we have been addressing over the months is police officers' age. You had mentioned you have a lot of young officers. And so the question is do you think officers should come in at least 25 years old and at least with a bachelor's degree? They found out that in California, that's going to be one of the norms. They're starting to work on that in some of the major cities. And the reason for that is they found out those people are not only educated to where they can, do proper reports, but they're also educated to the where they can communicate with other people. Also, at 25 years old, they're not wild West guys. They're not shooting from the hip. Anyone can answer that.
Yes, Dan, you bring up a really interesting point, and I will fight you on this one. I think we miss an opportunity. I think we miss a really unique opportunity when it comes to if we limit people on their age. We miss an opportunity. Like me, I grew up on my own at the age of 16, couch surfed for many years, put myself through college, eventually many years later finished up with a bachelor's and eventually a master's degree. But I didn't have the support. I didn't have the family support or local support other than friends or people that took me under their wing. So my street cred was really good. I had a lot of knowledge about what was going on in my community and how I could be in touch with my community. At the age of 21, I was more mature than probably the next person at the age of 35 going through law school. Honestly can say that. But I don't want to discount the fact that there are people that don't have the opportunities that maybe Major King or Chief Deputy Smith had, or even General Counsel Scott had. They didn't have these opportunities to just go to school and go to college, get a job. That's rare. So I would never do anything that eliminates or keeps those folks that have a lot of experience, life experience in a very short time. I would never eliminate them from coming in to do the work that we think is the people's work, that need people like them that understand the struggle, the real struggle. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I was thinking, because it seems as if you're suggesting from a point you don't want to eliminate a group of people that may have real life experience and that could apply that into the field of policing. While I believe Stan's position was more or less maybe the maturation point. One of the points that we had discussed in a previous installation of our conversation was that when sometimes young people get into this field, they are not fully developed in that area to be out in the field and to be doing the people's work, which is oftentimes very, it's very quick. It's very, you have to think on the fly. I believe that there are a lot of people out there that have the maturation to do it, but it seems as though from Stan's and I's point of view, that I think it's that barrier that between 20 and maybe 25 that has the ability for people to maybe go to college or get some type of more education that would allow them to be more equipped to make those quick decisions in the field of policing.
Zorlin, I'm out of the box thinker. I don't think like that. I just don't. And I'll just be completely honest with you that my maturity level and many people that I know that went through similar circumstances such as mine, we matured a lot quicker than up to the, statistics say that up to the age of 27, your brain is still developing, and we have the ability to make change behaviors. And I agree with that, but I don't think we should put a definitive line on. It's sort of like, you got to be 21 to buy alcohol, because at the age of 21 you're mature now. I disagree with that. I think that I think it's situational. I think it's individual, and I think it's I think we need to look at all that. To eliminate somebody because of an experience or because of an age, I think is absolutely doing an injustice to what we're trying to do. And we need that input. We need that experience. We need, in our line of work, we need people that have been in the boots on the ground and been in the ditch, like I was, to be able to say this is what we've been through. This is what we can change, or this is what we can add, or this is how we can help. But don't discount us, because we're not stupid, and we're not somebody that's just so immature because of a number. And that's probably where we will respectfully disagree.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't disagree either, because I came on at 20 years old in the fire service. So at 20 years old, I got in the job, and you're right. When you're young, you quickly learn the rules, the regs, and things you can and cannot do. However, we have been discussing this in other meetings, and we found that people do seem to do better with more age and more education. And that's probably true, but I also see your point of view. You don't want to lose somebody who's had experience that could bring more to the department. I understand.
Yeah, so let's just eliminate the age of 18 to go into the military. I mean, we're putting our kids out there to defend our country at the age of 18. If we're going to put an age on it and a limit on it, let's be real. I mean, we have the ability to make change, and we have the ability to train people. And I think I don't want to lose that. In South Carolina, you have to be 21 to carry a gun, so they can't even come into this profession before the age of 21. But you can go to the military and carry a gun, and you can go overseas and travel the world and be put out there to defend your country. So I think we need to look at that.
I think that's an interesting point of view, and to think about that, you had said, speaking on working with their training and things like that. One of the things that you had said in your campaign was moving to hold officers more accountable to their actions in regards to community policing. How have you moved to hold your officers more accountable to their actions and to how they treat their community?
So Zorlin, I think part of that is how do we put people in the community that can be a part of that community and be problem solvers for that community. That's what we're focused on. Chief Smith said earlier, like service beyond the call. I don't want people going to a call because somebody's in crisis and not be able to resolve that crisis just that one time. I mean, we have repeated calls that we go into areas and we know that this person's in crisis maybe 4 or 5 times over the series of a month. What are we going to do as a profession and as problem solvers for our community to resolve those issues? And this is the permission we're giving people right now to do. to go in and not just serve, but serve beyond what you're called to do. And so that is the initiative. Chief Smith said earlier, people are fighting right now in our agency. These young, very smart, very dedicated individuals, they're fighting to get the recognition to say, hey, look at me, I did this to help this person. That's not a bad problem to have, y'all. That is not a bad problem to have. And if we could get that buy-in from everybody that's wearing a uniform to serve beyond and to do for the community what they should have been doing all along, that's their purpose. So it's just things like that. We mentioned earlier about the diversity forums. You know, I told you earlier, I'm a world traveler. I love to travel the world. I love to learn about culture. I have my favorite places to go and to visit. But I don't think I've ever learned more than sitting in those diversity forums. And Chief said earlier, they were some difficult conversations, some tense conversations, but they were necessary to learn about each other and to learn about what we as people, as our community can do to make things better. My only question to them ever going into those diversity forums is not to hear me speak, because I'm not really good at it. My question to them is, what can we do to be better at what we're doing? And that opens up a lot of opportunity.
Barry, do you have a question?
Yes, Dan, thank you. I'd like to ask Officer Fletcher, because he, more than anyone else, seems to have the boots on the ground, so to speak. You know, they've been using the term quite a bit in the last year or so, defund the police. And when you look into it, they obviously don't want to get rid of police, but they have identified some areas that someone else might take that job. And, you know, and I'm just wondering, is there anything that you do that could be ceded to a social service agency, a hospital, or whatever, in your opinion?
There's a lot that gets placed in the law enforcement bucket because it's convenient. Without getting into that deep rabbit hole, the main thing for right now, what's relevant for now, I would think would be the mental health aspects of the jobs we do. We report, or we respond to a call. We don't know what that call is until we actually get there. But if it does turn into be a mental health, a person in mental health crisis, right, we need resources to help us deal with that. We're there for security, make sure that the incident is documented and everything, but we can't fix everything. But it's easy for, and I'm just code enforcement to send us somewhere because they're getting complaints about my neighbor's yard's not cut, or he's doing this, or she's doing that. There's a lot of things that, like I said, just get tossed into the law enforcement bucket because it's easy, convenient, you're here for the public, here, you guys deal with it. And it allows that entity to say, yeah, we told law enforcement about it, and then we get hit with it. We enforce the laws. We don't make them, and we don't adjudicate them. We enforce the laws. So when those two other pieces that I just, the adjudication or the creation of, when something fails there, we're the tip of the spear. We're the first one they point at, you're the problem, you did this, and that's not the case. So people or the system needs to take ownership of what is theirs and start shifting it to the others so they can get out of the hot seat.
Right.
Also recognize that as a society, a lot of these problems we can fix as a community with a community approach. It's not to say law enforcement doesn't want to, we don't want nothing to do with it, wash our hands and walk away. We're saying we need help to do that. I can help you with that person within mental health crisis at this time. We can deal with that, but we need the resources and know where to go and what to do with that. Because we can't just make a decision, boom, 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 and then, for lack of a better term, that person is incarcerated when they needed medical help. Or we go try to ticket our way out of something, which doesn't fix it. It just causes more problems for the individual. So like I said, there's lots of things. I think if we as a society can get away from the magic bullet approach, if we do this one thing, it's going to fix everything, and start looking at it holistically from the ground up. And that includes us as law enforcement. All right, what are we doing that we shouldn't be doing? And are we capable of doing that? And not be afraid to say, all right, we can't take care of that. We can't do that.
What about domestic violence calls?
Those are I've responded to many of those. So on their faces, they're easy. Somebody did something to someone that can be physical, or it can be threatening, or it can be just as simple as pulling the phone out of the wall and keeping the other person from communicating.
Mhm.
So those are easy. But when you start getting the repeat calls, keep going to the house, you already know who it is, that human psyche, the honeymoon phase, they're afraid. There's many reasons, and other people easy to judge an individual, man or woman. Well, if I were you, I would leave. Well, you're not them. You don't know if they have the resources. They've got kids, they need money, they have where are they going to go? There's a lot of things playing into why they stay that you can't just judge them for that. So again, that's another approach to where it's the psyche of the individual. Whoever that victim is in that domestic violence, they are the ones that need help. And in a way, they are the ones that are in mental crisis, because they have to come to themselves and say, all right, I am tired of this situation. I want to get out. Until that happens, all we can do is respond. And we have to look at it, even if it's 10 times to that residence, each time is the first time. You can't get complacent. You can't say, yeah, that's Mr. and Mrs. Jones again. I'll take my time, because history has shown us, that that's when that complacency pops its head up, is when something bad happens.
Mhm. But are all of them, let's say you get a call and they say there's no weapons involved.
Always assume there is.
I know. But so that's not an area that could be handled by another, let's say, social service agency or something like that, in your opinion?
No, ma'am.
Because you're out there. You're out there.
Yes, ma'am. You have to, even if they say there's no weapons involved, okay, let's give it. There's no weapon involved. Let's say it's a very large individual or somebody skilled in one of the martial arts. You're sending somebody into a situation that's potentially dangerous. So they themselves can be the weapon. So again, we're public safety. I think we still should always respond to that, because it might be cut and dry to where she's the primary aggressor, she's the primary aggressor, we must make an arrest. That's easy. But if you can't figure that out, or there's no weapons involved, but he or she clearly did something, why would you send social workers into that situation and they have no idea, and they're thinking it's a clean, sterile call, and then now they're attacked? Now we got a bigger problem, the assault and what caused the assault, which is they're responding to someplace that they weren't prepared to do. So if we can do a partnership with that, and especially for repeat calls, when you know you're going to the same place over and over again for the same type of call or disturbance, it'd be nice to have the resources that say, all right, we're going here, something that triggers or flags to let us know, yep, that's a problem. It's going to be domestic violence related. The call takers know it's domestic violence related. So law enforcement is there to make sure that security piece is there. And then once we get the scene stabilized, and if there's receptive, we don't have to make if we can't determine a clear arrest, then the social people can step in. And even if you make an arrest, they can still step in and be there for the victim on an advocacy part on the front end, as opposed to after trial or before trial, and it goes through the adjudication part.
So Chief Graziano and Deputy Chief Smith, what type of training are you having for your officers to get on scene and de-escalate as opposed to escalate?
Oh.
Yeah, so the de-escalation is the buzzword of the century right now, and I can tell you that the first time I ever went through de-escalation training was about 4 years ago, and I remember how incredibly helpful it was to me to learn the skills through the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and this training that we went through, and how I used that training 4 years ago to carry me through some severe mental health calls that would have could have resulted in basically could have turned, I want to say, would have been very bad for the other person as well as mine, but would have been justified. And I say that because that is something that has been added to training over the last few years. We are doing it here, and we're making it annual. We just hosted some CIT training, critical incident training to involve mental illness. That is an annual thing now. It's not what our detention center did not have access to that training. We have just opened it up to people in detention center because they are the ones that use this skill, these skills, these verbal skills, these de-escalation skills on a daily basis. I'm not saying that law enforcement doesn't. We see our share. Trust me, we've seen this increase in what I would describe as the most mental health, the level of mental health calls that we've been in the last 4 months have been extreme, and that is putting it lightly. And everyone says, well, it's because of COVID, but no, we've seen the trends over the years. In the 80s, they started shutting down the mental institutions. They started taking the funding away from the mental institutions. You talk about defunding the police. They defunded the mental institutions and the places that could provide services for people. We're just seeing how bad that is now. And we're living it day by day at our agency and throughout the United States. You start defunding the police and taking away the tools to deal with these people. I don't even want to be here. I don't even want to be in a world where that exists. But so we're doing a lot to increase our awareness, not just our awareness, but our training with our officers to keep everybody safe. I mean, that's the goal. Look, we want to, I honestly can say I work with the most dedicated staff and professionals probably in the world. I can say that. I'm on the East Coast. You guys can't touch me. But I can say that I work with some people that the most dedicated people that give everything they can to this profession to make sure they go home safely and that the people they interact daily with are safe. And so I think the whole mental health issue and the issues that we face with training and the de-escalation, it's continuing and it has to continue. But like Major King said earlier, we can't do it all. I mean, they keep putting everything on law enforcement. We go in to stabilize a situation, to make it safe, but then we need additional resources to deal with the effects of what we're doing, the people that we're dealing with, the resources that we can't provide. We can do one of two things. We can take them to a facility to get the help they need if they're willing to go, because we can't make them go, or we can put them in jail. And most of the agencies in our state will put them in jail. Well, guess what? The mental health facility, the largest one in the state, is our detention center, and we just do not have the resources to deal with that. So that's another fight, but that's what's in place, and we're really working hard to change that.
We won't keep you much longer. I see, I know when the fire chief came in, the new fire chief always comes in and all of a sudden you lose 5 or 4 or 3 or 2 old chiefs that don't want to work under the new chief, and they just move on, they retire. Looking at your staff, it looks like it's pretty much new. Was there a major exodus when you moved in?
I wouldn't say there was a major exodus. We have a plan. The staff that you see, with the exception of Major King, was internal. The other 2 were external. No, I mean, we have a plan. And the plan is that these are the things we're gonna do. We have a vision. These folks shared that vision. And if you don't want to be a part of that vision, you have to leave. So yeah, there was some house cleaning that had to be done. It was necessary. I don't regret it. I'm not saying that it's over. We still have a ways to go. But again, we're 4 months into it, but day one, we knew what needed to happen in terms of getting the right people in the right places to carry out the vision. And I don't regret that.
Well, Sheriff, really,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I really thank you for coming on today and being with us and speaking on all of the topics and all the questions and answering all that we had. One last question that I have for you is, what would you say to the people watching today that have had years and years, and especially over the last summer, of the crazy amount of policing mishaps that we've seen? What would you say to people that don't have the best outlook on policing? What would be your statement to them to kind of maybe change their mind, or to not maybe change their mind, but to persuade them? Not even that, but what would you say to people that are watching today to give them a greater insight on what you're doing as a police officer or as the sheriff, and what you believe the future of policing looks like in your community, and what you would hope for across the nation?
So thank you so much for having us. And what I would say to you is this: there's a couple things. Great leader, the quality of some great leaders that I know and that I've been inspired by is having that empathetic ear to listen and engage those around you without feeling threatened, creating a space that is safe for criticism, for critique, without judgment, and engaging those around you who challenge, like my colleagues here, challenge me to be better. And I'm not afraid of that, but we are trying to create an environment of inclusion, of trust, and of acceptance. And I think great leaders are able to focus on the best people despite their setbacks and work towards solutions and problem solving. That's what we're trying to do. Give us a chance. Not that it matters on the West Coast because we're on the East Coast, but give us a chance. I keep going back to this very powerful class that I took in graduate school, and it kept saying, "What is your why?" And I kept saying, "Why? You know, why are you here?" Everyone's, "Why do you feel that this is important? Why?" And I said, if I keep focusing on the why, how am I going to get to the how? How do we get this done? So stop asking me why and start getting your hands dirty and getting into where we are now, and how do we make this happen? And all I'm saying is, we've only been here 4 months. Give us a chance. And that's what I would tell people. There is hope. I understand, and I think our staff understands, that without action, without tangible change, there will not be peace. We all want peace. Let's work towards it. And that's what I would tell them.
That's
Well, I
wonderful.
thank you all
Yeah,
for
thank you.
coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining us, and I want to thank the guests for coming today, and I want to thank the attendees for being a part of another great installation of Conversations on Race and Policing. Stan, I want to thank you for being such a great co-host. Mary, thank you for your great questions, and again to our guests. And Sheriff Graziano, thank you for coming and answering our questions and giving us great insight into policing on the East Coast. We want to thank you for joining us on another great installation of Conversations on Race and Policing, and we'll see you next time. Have a
Be
great day.
safe, everyone. Be
Thank you.
safe.
Everybody.
Please. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.